Happy New Year and welcome to Community Centered and welcome to 2025. I hope everyone had a wonderful 2024 and that so far 2025 is going smoothly for you, that you still are on top of those New Year's resolutions. We'll see, right? See how far we make it with all of them. I thought that a great way to start out 2025 was to take a look back at 2024, and we're going to do that with another time audit. During the summer, I made a time audit from my time in 2020 compared to the year 2023. So 2020 was the year before I started growing my community, and 2023 was obviously 3 years into the process. So I made that in the summer, and today we're going to take a time audit for 2024 and compare it to 2023. So you're seeing 1 year's time difference instead of a 3-year time difference. So we'll dive into that. We'll dive into some of the goals I made and see if I stuck with them, how much improvement I made, and we'll also go through some of the things I completed this year. So I'm excited to share with you. So let's talk about the time audit. So if you're new here, welcome. And so you understand the time audit is basically me trying to figure out where I allocated all the hours I had to do things in a year. So 24 hours a day, 365 days in a year, where did all those hours end up? Some of it in sleeping, some of it in working, and then all the various activities that I do. So the way I create my time audit is by taking the hours a week or month that I spend doing various activities, and I just calculate it out to a full year. I could keep a time journal. I don't really want to keep a time journal and log all my hours doing various things. I just try to get it as close as I possibly can. I do have a miscellaneous section within my time audit of hours I didn't account for. And those might be hours spent driving, commuting. It could have been hours that maybe I spent more hours talking to friends and family than I thought, but it ended up there instead. So that's what the time audit is. That's how it calculates out. So we're going to take a look at 2024 and compare it to 2023 and see what improvements I made over the course of the year. Here is a chart of my time audit from 2023, and here is the new chart for 2024. As you can see, there is a dramatic shift in my time spent scrolling and streaming. It's down to just 18% of my time, which is calculated out to 1,560 hours a year. That is actually down 728 hours from 2023. And that's the equivalent of about 30 days. So 30 days of my time that I spent doing something more important to me than aimlessly scrolling through social media or binge watching shows. That's really, the scrolling and streaming section is really the section that I'm always trying to cut down on. Now, my miscellaneous time did increase. The miscellaneous time is anything that I couldn't account for. A lot of it's driving time, chores, reading, knitting. With my increased activity, I'm sure that I'm spending more time driving than I'm accounting for. I also wouldn't be surprised if there's some shopping or talking to family and friends that's just not accounted for in the rest of it. I've also spent more time with family this year, an increase of 175 hours, which is great. It wasn't one of my goals last year. I think I just had a few extra trips and phone calls this year. So 178 extra hours. I also started attending church service this year. I did start later in the year, somewhere around September, October, attending church on Sunday. So that number is not very big, and I'm sure that when I look at my time audit for 2025, it'll be much greater because it'll be a whole year's worth of Sundays. Another thing that changed in 2024 is I started this channel. Now, there's only a few hours for this channel in 2024 as I figured things out and only got a few videos out to everyone that year, but in 2025, it should jump dramatically. And we'll talk a little bit more about my plans for this channel later on in the video. I did spend less time with the VFW in 2024. Our monthly meetings conflicted with another group that I'm in, so I wasn't able to attend the monthly meetings anymore, but I'm still volunteering and going to social night with the VFW. So that is the visual representation of the time audit. There are a couple things that aren't entirely represented on the chart that I wanted to highlight. A couple fun things that I got to do this year. My knitting club decided to take a Ukrainian egg dyeing class. So I got to learn all about Ukrainian egg dyeing and how the process goes and make my own dyed egg. And my knitting club also decided to take an intro to stained glass class. So we learned how to cut the glass and get it all sanded and get the metal around it and weld it all together and everything. And it was a lot of fun. It was so much fun. And of course, the great thing about crafts is that you come home with crafts at the end of it. So those are two wonderful things that I got to do. And the really big thing I got to do is I went to the Homesteaders of America Conference, which is in Virginia, which I'm in a northern state, so I actually drove 9 hours to get to Virginia for that. And, I was there over the course of several days. I actually had one day where I was exploring Virginia. I went to the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley, which was really pretty, really spectacular. The Homesteaders of America Conference is in the fall, so driving out there with the colors and the leaves was amazing. Great area. Had a lot of fun at the conference. Got to see some animals, got to hear some people's stories about homesteading, got to do a lot of shopping. A lot of shopping. I really enjoyed it and I had a spectacular time. Oh, and actually, the most exciting thing about it is I stayed at the Wayside Inn, which is I believe the longest running inn in America. It's it's very fun. The building itself, you can tell, has been added on, so it's kind of got weird steps and hallways kind of places, but it's very old, very nice, just kind of to be there and feel like basically it fulfilled my dream of wanting to live in an antique store. Is what it did. So I really enjoyed that. I loved my trip out there, and it was fun just kind of taking a solo trip by myself. And like I said, it was a great area and had a lot of fun and learned a lot of things. So that is my time audit for the year and the highlights of the year, which is a great way, fun way to look back on things and also maybe a little geeky to get into the nerdy numbers, what has changed, what hasn't. But there are other ways that I like to look at what I have done in a year. So we're going to look at what I have knitted this year because I love to knit, and a little bit of what I read this year because that was actually one of my goals, was to read more this year. Let's jump on into those. So the first thing I decided to knit in 2024, which it was January, and I knit Christmas presents, so usually the later half of the year and fall and everything, I spend a lot of time knitting for other people, so I get very excited to knit something for myself in January. This is the first thing that I knit. This was my big project in 2024, and it is a cardigan. And yes, there's still some strands hanging off of it because I don't like the sleeves on this cardigan, so I'm actually going to take them all out and redo them. So I haven't done the finish work on the cardigan. I haven't worn it yet. I did love it. I did love knitting it. I had a great time. Like I said, it's just the sleeves were disappointing. They kind of ruined the look of the cardigan a bit. So I'm going to take them out and do them a different way. And maybe sometime in the future, after I've done that, sometime in the future, maybe I'll show you guys the finished cardigan. But yes, this was several months worth of work to knit this cardigan. After the cardigan, I made a really special gift for a coworker because she was expecting her first grandbaby. So I knit a blanket for her husband / the kids and grandkid to be. So that is the next thing that I knitted in 2024. And after the blanket, I had to get on top of Christmas presents. I like to knit for Christmas. I like to do handmade gifts for Christmas. I think it just adds something special to it. So this year, I knitted everyone hats. And actually, my original goal was to do hats and matching mittens, which I bought all the yarn to make said mittens, and I only managed to get the hats done. So I hope none of my family is watching this, because guess what you're getting next year for Christmas? It's mittens. So that is what I knitted in 2024. Actually, for my sister, she didn't want a hat. She said that she uses headbands. So I knit a headband. So I had one headband, 4 hats, and a baby blanket and a cardigan is what I knitted up in 2024. Hi guys, jumping back in here real quick because when I went through all of my knitting projects for 2024, I forgot one. And that would be this strange looking thing. So I actually do a bit of canning and preserving of food. And in order to can and preserve food, when you bring it out of the canner and it's hot, you have to leave it somewhere to sit in order to cool back down to room temperature, and all the lids like pop and everything, and it's a lot of fun. In order to do that, you can't set the cans down on a cold countertop because that would crack the jars and then you lose all your food, and it's not fun. So you're supposed to lay towels down in between the counter and the hot can or the hot jar, and I kind of hate doing that because the towels, either you fold them and you have, where you fold things, you have like the little like ridge that's a little bit just thicker than the rest of it, or towels have patterns in them, or you need multiple towels in order to cover a countertop. It was just driving me nuts. So I have a lot of scrap yarn, a lot of cotton scrap yarn from knitting dishcloths. So I took a bunch of those scraps and I made this. It's double layered, and it's the same width as my countertop. So I use this when I'm canning, and then I don't have weird gaps in between different towels and different thicknesses. I can lay all of them down. I can set all of them down and they're all flat and level instead of being all over the place. So that is another knitting project that I got done this year, and I love it. I love how crazy it looks. It would also make a great dish drying mat if I ever wanted to make another one, but happy with this one. So there's one more knitting project that I forgot to add to the list. Now, back to the video. So last year when I made my video comparing my time audit of 2020 to my time audit of 2023, I made 3 goals for myself for 2024. One thing I wanted to do was I wanted to cut out the background noise and not have a podcast or YouTube video playing while I cooked or cleaned or knit. I wasn't successful in that. Now, my scrolling and streaming time did come down in 2024, so I'm happy, but I still enjoy listening to those things when I cook and clean. It's just too quiet for me when it's not, for some of those tasks. So I didn't really meet that goal, but at the same time, I'm not heartbroken that I didn't. Another goal I made was this channel that I was starting, and I wanted to focus on it. I did indeed start the channel and get some videos out. After my trip to Virginia in October, I got sick. And then we were in the middle of the holiday season. So I didn't have time to put out videos in the later quarter of last year. But we're back now. Holidays are over. Hopefully I won't get sick again and I can post more videos. And then my third goal was that I wanted to read more in 2024. And that was maybe too vague of a goal, because what is reading more? Before we move on to my goals for 2025, I want to review what I read in 2024. And in terms of read, I mean read and finished, because I am a part of a book club. I do start a lot of books because I'm in the book club, but a lot of them don't grab my attention and I end up not reading them, which my book club teases me about. But my book club's very open. We have people come all the time that don't read things, especially me. I'm like the poster child for that. So no one's offended by that at all. But I do want to go over what I did read and complete this year, and maybe a little bit about how my reading tastes have changed over the years, and then we'll go into my goals for 2025. The first book I read in 2024 is Let Me Be a Woman by Elizabeth Elliot. And this book is actually a lot of letters that Elizabeth Elliot wrote her daughter to prepare her for marriage, because she was engaged and she wanted to prepare her for what marriage would bring in terms of having a relationship with your spouse and just giving each other a little bit of grace. And it's very much about being a Christian woman. I will link all the books in the description below, so if you're interested in checking any of them out, go ahead. But I really like this read. You can see that it's pretty thin, It's pretty easy to get through, especially if you're someone that you like to have like little snippets to read. I think the chapters are like 2, 3, maybe 5 pages each. So it's fairly quick to get through, even if you're just like, oh, I just have, 10 minutes to pick it up before bed in the evening. You're never stuck in a chapter, trying to get to a good place to stop. It's always pretty quick and easy. It does give you something to think about too, if you like that sort of read. So my next book that I read in 2024 was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which I feel like there's a big genre shift between Let Me Be a Woman and The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This is a mystery. It's obviously about trying to figure out who the murderer is of Evelyn Hardcastle. It's a little hard to explain. The person who is in charge of solving her murder is basically reliving the same day over and over again, but as different guests. So one day he's in one guest body, and a different day he's in another guest body, seeing things from different perspectives to try and figure out who is murdering Evelyn Hardcastle. It was a lot of fun. I've actually owned this book for years. I must have bought it 4 or 5 years ago. How old is this? 2018. So yeah, I must have bought this because it was paperback. So yeah, I must have bought this 2019, 2020. I had this sitting on my shelf for a very long time, been meaning to read it, and then a bunch of people in my book club read it. We didn't read it for book club, but people in book club started reading it and happened to mention it. I was like, you know what, I have that, I need to read it. So I did, and it's great. I loved it. I love the mystery. We have actually a lot of mystery readers in our book club. My book club mostly reads historical fiction. We don't read a lot of mystery, but we do sprinkle some in every once in a while. But people outside of book club will read a ton of mystery books. And I have had people who read mystery books really love this because they don't always see the ending coming. And it throws you a twist, and that's always really nice, especially for a mystery reader. You get too into the mystery and eventually you just know what's going to happen. This book threw some people for a twist and they really enjoyed it. So, highly recommend. It is a longer book, but it is worth it. The rest of the books that I read in 2024, I rented from the library, so I don't have the physical copy here to show you, but let's talk about some of those books because I did really enjoy everything that I read this year. So the next book that I read was The Wager by David Grann. And it is about a shipwreck, a ship from England that shipwrecks off of the west coast of South America, and a little bit of what do you do. Passengers from The Wager showed up in England well over a year later. It was really crazy how much longer what the time span was from when they were shipwrecked to when they managed to get back, and how on earth they managed to do that. So it's a little bit of a mystery in that sense of some of that storyline, but you don't really know how they got from point A to point B. But it is as much as possible based on historical fact and what they have recorded from people. And I found it really interesting. If you're not interested in maybe that nautical old school era, then maybe it wouldn't wouldn't interest you. But I found it really interesting. Like I said, my book club reads a lot of historical fiction, so we kind of like to dive into those facts and learn something. A lot of us say that we love to read the books that teach us something, that take us to a time, especially if it's something like we can Google pictures of or something. We just enjoy, I guess, the book that is a museum type experience where you're learning the whole way through it. Really recommend that book. The next book I read and finished for book club was The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. The Locked Door is kind of, I guess you'd classify it as a mystery. The main character in The Locked Door is a woman who, when she was a teenager or a preteen, her dad went away for murder, for being a serial killer. So it was very interesting, this idea of how do people see and how do people treat a daughter of a serial killer, where maybe they're questioning, is she stable? And it's really fascinating. And then, of course, things are happening around her that are basically suggesting that maybe she's murdering people. So there's a whole police investigation. So it's a mystery suspense kind of book. Really enjoyed it. Really got through it fine. I wouldn't say it's the best book I ever read, but it's a pretty solid mystery book. After the Locked Door, I read a book for myself, for my own purposes, called Overloaded by Ginny Smith. And Overloaded is about how the brain works, how it reacts to chemicals, what exactly is going on up there, especially where it pertains to memory or addiction. And I just wanted to have a base level knowledge of how the brain works. What's going on up there on a biological and neurological level. So I read Overloaded. I really enjoyed it. As Ginny Smith points out in the book, everything is always being learned about. So there are some things that, even though it's true now and this is our understanding of it, you have to understand that things do shift and change, and that may not be the case. It may not be the case now that everything that I read in that book is still considered true, which is fascinating in and of itself to think about. I will say that I noticed that my reading has shifted a little bit more away from fiction to enjoying these kind of books that really dive into a specific topic. So in this case, Overloaded is about how the brain works, and obviously addiction, and how much signaling we're getting from the world around us now in a 21st century age. And there's other books that I've been looking at that I've been interested in reading that are more along that path, more natural science, or not some maybe memoir type things, but stuff that goes more along that trail and less along the fiction or fantasy or even historical fiction genre. So I'm going to be exploring that a little bit more this year, hoping to get a few books that have interested me, that I've added to my Goodreads want to read list that I haven't gotten around to yet. Last but not least, the final book that I read and finished for 2024 was Clytemnestra by Constanza Cassetti. I think I said that right. Constanza Cassetti. So Clytemnestra is a figure in Greek mythology, and I could be saying that name wrong too. I don't know. But she's a figure in Greek mythology, and our book club read several years ago Circe. I forget the author's name, but we read Circe. And Circe was a great book. I can't say all. Some people don't get into the Greek mythology stuff. A lot of us enjoyed Circe, and then we read Ariadne. And for our 10-year reunion, because my book club has been around for 10 years. So for kind of our 10-year anniversary type meeting, they told me, because I've basically been in the group since the very, very beginning, told me to pick another Greek mythology book. And I'm into Greek mythology. I enjoy learning about it. So anytime that there is Greek mythology, I am kind of trying not to, but I always kind of end up like being the teacher that's like, I'm teaching a class on Greek mythology. So there's many different books out there that take figures from Greek mythology and just basically write a fictional story for them for their lives, incorporating all these different pieces of where you see them in Greek mythology. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to read. It is one of those things that you do get some of. Obviously, there's, people take liberties, but it gets you some of the idea of what life was even like, or how we believe life was like in those early periods of history that are long lost to us. So, really enjoyed Clytemnestra. It is, and I'll tell you this because it's in the description of the book, it's about a woman who becomes queen and kills her king. But a lot of other stuff happens before that. So it is a very interesting book, a very interesting read, especially on a figure in Greek mythology that I hadn't really heard of before. I knew who Circe was, and Ariadne is definitely someone that you're like, oh right, I know what story she's a part of. Clytemnestra is not one that I really knew a lot about. So it was very fun to kind of read and understand, oh, I see what pieces we're picking up and what she's a part of in this. in the family tree of the Greek myth and her her role in different stories. So there you have it. I finished 6 books this year. And I said we were going to start talking about goals for 2025 next. And my first one is to read 7 books in 2025. As I said, my goal for 2024 was too vague because I just said I wanted to read more. But what is more, I don't know how many books I finished in 2023. So I know that I read and completed 6 books in 2024. So I want to read 7 books in 2025, which should be a perfectly accessible goal for me. Should be able to do it. We'll see how I do. I've already failed to read the first book for book club. It was a book of short stories and I read the first short story and then none of the rest. So not off to a great start, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm sure I can find some books that will capture my attention. As for other goals in 2025, I also want to do more with this channel. My goal is to upload 12 videos. Now that's a lot compared to the 3 I did last year, but that's like a video a month, and I think I could probably manage that, especially because there are some months that I think it will be very easy for me to post more than one. So, as I said, quantifiable goals for 2025, read 7 books and post 12 videos on my channel. And then for my last goal, and this one's maybe also a little vague, but I am at the point where I want to add something new to my schedule, something new to my weekly routine. It may be Toastmasters. I've been looking at that a little bit, which Toastmasters is a group that gets together and helps with some public speaking and just in general like nervousness or anxiety around that. And they basically do it by exposure therapy. The way I had it described to me once was, well, they basically hand you a card that says toast at your cousin's wedding and shows you right on stage you're making a toast right here and now. And obviously it's just in front of the group, but still, you're making a toast all of the sudden when you hadn't planned for it. So it's a little bit improv, but it's not necessarily comedic improv. It is meant to just get you over that nervousness of public speaking and to develop some of those public speaking skills. So I've been looking at Toastmasters because I'm apparently crazy. And I've also been thinking maybe an exercise class, maybe kickboxing. I don't know. Those are a couple ideas that I've had rolling around in my head. And we'll see if I choose one of those or if I choose something else. If I do, I plan to do a little bit of vlogging along the way on it and put a video together on my journey through it. So there you have it. There are my 3 goals for 2025. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any goals or resolutions that you want to share, feel free to do so in the comments below and join me here next time for further discussion on how to build your community here and now.